And as soon as it does, I'm going to stop. Okay. And so here we go. Again, welcome to the October topical issue meeting. We are talking about Tucson's declaration of a climate emergency. And I think we have a really great program lined up. We've got Shane Reiser here, who has been trained as a climate reality project ambassador through Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And he's going to give a short presentation about that. We also have Fatima Luna from the City of Tucson Mayor's Office to talk about a little bit more in detail about the climate emergency declaration. And then we're going to circle back around, talk a little bit more about Tucson for the World, just so that you're aware of what Tucson for the World is. It'll be a great opportunity to do some follow-up projects if you got inspired by what you're hearing tonight. And then we should wrap up. I do have a couple of details I can go over at the end if anyone has interest in how we scored on the last Sustainable Cities report. And then we'll finish the program. So without further ado, I am going to stop presenting and I'm going to turn over to Shane. Shane, you should be able to share your screen now.
All right. I'm doing that now. I feel like I always have to narrate when we're doing it. I know, right? Everyone does that on these things now. It's like, hey, all right, sharing my screen. Do you see my slides?
And as a matter of fact, we do.
Okay. Well, let me click play here and pull up my presenter notes. Great. Oh, too far. Well, hello, everybody. Dan, can you describe to everybody why you asked me to do this, why you thought it would be a good opening before we have the next discussion?
Well, I think it's good to put this in the framing of what the city was acting on. Of course, you know, they are concerned about the reality of the climate emergency we face. And so the city did take action with urging from a number of people, including the Youth Climate Council. So there are a number of people who have had input into this. I was really happy to see the mayor and council unanimously acted on this declaration. And so, yeah, really, I wanted you just to give this brief presentation from Climate Reality just to set the stage for what the city of Tucson did.
Great, thank you. That's what I was hoping you would say. Hi, everybody. My name's Shane Reiser. Like Dan said, I got trained to be a climate reality leader. And basically all that really means is that I get the permission to give the same presentation that Al Gore's been giving for years now. He's got two versions of his presentation. I'm going to give you a really short one. It's meant to be delivered in 10 minutes. And if I move at the same speed that he moved, I'll succeed in that. But really, it's just a quick overview of climate change, what it is, the science behind it, what the consequences are. It also takes a look at the solutions that are out there. So it starts to get a little bit gloomy in the beginning, but then it comes back and we look at some of the opportunities and solutions and ends up being quite optimistic. So bear with me through some of the gloomy stuff. I thought well educated on the issues before I did this program, but I still learned a ton. So I'm sure all of you are also quite read on the issues, but I'm sure there's nuggets in here that you haven't seen before, or maybe different ways of thinking about it. So I encourage you to just be open-minded, and you might actually get some really good talking points that you can steal for all the great things that you do. And of course, if you think this presentation is useful, you can also get trained, and it's very accessible. I think some 14,000 people have been trained, and that number is growing. Just a quick introduction about myself. I've lived in Tucson for 5 years. I started a nonprofit called For the World, which is trying to fight climate change through innovation and entrepreneurship, which you'll hear more about at the end. And I'm getting my master's in sustainability leadership from ASU. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that, but it's very interesting. All right, let's dive into this. So here is a picture that you guys might have seen. This is the first picture of Earth that was that any human has ever seen, the first photograph taken on the Apollo mission. And it really changed the way that humanity thinks about our home. And it reminds us that we're all connected and that our actions have an impact on our planet. I want to visit 3 questions with you today. Do we have to change? Can we change? And whatever that last one was, will we change? Will we actually change? Do we have the ability to do it? Let's dive into the first one. Do we have to change? Must we change? Now, for the average person, or for any person, when you're standing on the ground, you're looking up at the sky, it feels like a vast and limitless expanse. But really, the reality is that the sky is really just a thin shell of atmosphere surrounding the planet. And we are putting 152 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into that atmosphere every single day. And that pollution, especially carbon dioxide, is building up in the atmosphere and it's trapping heat. So if you remember this from your basic education on what climate change is and how it's been understood by scientists since the 1800s, energy from the sun comes down to Earth as light. The energy is absorbed by the Earth, and that is a good thing. It helps warm the Earth so we can live here. But some of that energy is then radiated back out of the atmosphere, and that is also good. But some of it is then captured and bounced back by the atmosphere in the form of heat. And what's happening as we introduce more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that atmosphere layer is thickening, and then more of that radiation is being bounced back onto Earth. Now, there are many sources of human-caused global warming pollution: agriculture, the burning of forests, transportation, many other factors, but the primary source and the cause of the rising global temperatures as we're seeing it today is the burning of fossil fuels. The fossil fuels still, unfortunately, to this day, provide more than 80% of the world's energy. Fossil fuel use and emissions have gone up dramatically since World War II. In just the last 3 years, there was a little bit of a leveling off, if you see that up on the right corner, but then you can also see a tiny little spike at the end, and it has spiked recently. As a result of this pollution being trapped in our atmosphere, global temperatures are rising. This is a really clear and easy to understand graph. Hopefully you can see global temperatures are rising dramatically. 19 of the 20 hottest years ever measured with the instruments we have to measure heat have occurred since 2001. 5 of the hottest within the last 5 years, 2006 being the hottest year of all. This is a visual that I love to show. This just shows average temperatures increasing by countries around the world since, gosh, I can't remember when that timeline started, but you can see it gets hotter and hotter and hotter in the late 1800s. And it hits home too. Here in Tucson, we are the 3rd fastest warming city in America. And right underneath us, we've got Phoenix. Heat has consequences. It's a problem all over the world. It's a problem in this country. It affects not just people, but animals, crops, and weather. Here's a guy who was a victim to heat exhaustion in Boston. On a global basis, more than 90% of all that extra heat that is trapped goes into the oceans. This is something I learned recently. The heat makes ocean-based storms like hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones stronger, more destructive. Half of the increase in global ocean heat has occurred in the last 20 years. And we see all kinds of consequences, even in the news today. This is just one example, Hurricane Florence in 2018 that hit the Carolinas, but I think we might actually be on record this year to have a record hurricane season. New Orleans just got hit. They said it felt like insult to injury. That extra heat disrupts the water cycle here on Earth. So the amount of water vapor that evaporates off the oceans increases as the oceans get warm. So the oceans get warm, more water is evaporated. That water vapor is then carried over onto the land and falls. And when it falls, now as a result, it is now falling in much bigger chunks, much bigger precipitation events. And when that land can't absorb all that water all at once, we get floods, we get mudslides, we get destruction. Extreme precipitation events have produced more rain and are becoming more common since the 1950s. Here's a supercell storm with a column of rain at its center hitting Montana in 2010. Extreme precipitation events lead to record flooding, which is happening all over the world. Here's some submerged bridges in 2015 in southern India. And sometimes people wonder how global warming can be blamed for both more rain and for drought. And what's happening here, if you've ever asked this question, that extra heat, that same heat, that is leading to more evaporation off the ocean, which then gets dumped on the earth, is also pulling more moisture out of the land even more quickly, out of our soil, causing longer and deeper droughts. And often that's happening in places that don't get that big rainfall. Changing precipitation patterns can lead to drought and water shortages. Another example is here in Brazil, which suffered a devastating drought in 2015 and 2016. Higher temperatures also have a direct effect on wildfires, which is another hot topic that we're seeing a lot here in the United States. This chart shows the correlation between higher temperatures and the occurrence of wildfires. Today, unfortunately, the fire season in the western United States is now 100 days longer than it was in the 1970s. In 2016, here's an example of a really destructive fire that hit Canada in Fort McMurray, where over 100,000 people had to be evacuated. And I'm sure you have plenty of other examples. We've got our examples right here in Tucson. Now, the insurance industry is well aware that climate-related extreme weather events are increasing worldwide, and they have calculated the losses. So in the last 2 years, they've been the most expensive. And this is, if you add up the damage done by storms, floods, fires, just in the United States, we've had losses of over 160 billion in 2018, 140 billion in 2019. Here's the first photo of I love this one. That was the first photo of a glacier in Greenland, in southwest Greenland, that was shot in 1935, and it shows a beautiful glacier that's covering the fjord walls. The second photo is the same glacier, almost completely melted by 2013, not even a century later, due to rising temperatures. NASA has precisely been able to measure the decline in the massive ice in both Greenland and Antarctica, and Antarctica, and all of this extra melting is raising sea levels worldwide. Here's a video in Miami Beach. This is on a sunny day. It did not rain this day. High tides are now regularly flooding the streets of Miami Beach, and this is happening in coastal cities all around the world, and the situation will only get worse as sea levels continue to rise. Miami is the #1 city at risk in terms of the assets that are at risk of being destroyed. And we've got Guangzhou, China, New York, second and third place. And if you look at it based on population, things do shift quite a bit. So we see that many large cities in developing countries are very much in danger. In parts of these cities, if parts of these cities become uninhabitable, big question is, where would the people go? The Department of Defense in the US has warned us for a long time in 2014 that refugee crisis connected to the climate crisis, as well as pandemic diseases, water shortages, and food shortages, is a massive threat. And heat stress also becoming a player in the refugee crisis because it's affecting our food. Heat stress is now beginning to decrease crop yields in everything from rice to corn to soybeans. And we also know that exposure to high levels of carbon dioxide decreases the nutrient content of crops such as rice, wheat, and soy. So not only is our food system at risk, but the nutritional value of our food is decreasing because of the excess carbon dioxide. And we know that climate change is a medical emergency. Of infectious diseases, heat stress, air pollution, waterborne diseases are all influenced by our changing climate. Water temperatures have an impact on. Let's just look, for example, on the movement of diseases around the world. So water temperatures have an impact on the spread of those diseases. You know, people getting on planes and ships play a part, but the range for the existence and occurrence of diseases expands regionally as places get warmer, which means that diseases like Zika can take root in new places. I think we just saw Zika pop up in Florida for the first time. Gosh, was that last year? Might have been this year. I don't know. The last 2 years are a total blur. But the main mosquito that spreads Zika also spreads dengue fever and yellow fever, and is now covering a much wider range in a warmer, wetter world. It also those mosquitoes are also able to incubate faster and breed more and transmit the disease for a longer period of time. So the health impacts of the climate crisis are sometimes often overlooked. We just think about the world ending, and we think about biodiversity, but the near-term health impacts of the climate crisis will affect millions of people. We are back to biodiversity. Climate change, along with other factors like ecosystem loss, is contributing to the worst extinction event since the dinosaurs some 65 million years ago. Now, all of these threats, if we add them up, and I think the World Economic Forum tried to do this, and there's even more things not listed on here. When we add them up, if we add up and we frame this as, what is the cost of emitting this carbon into our atmosphere, it is by far the #1 threat to our economy. So the question that I asked in the beginning, do we have to change? Must we change? I think it's clear economically, socially, environmentally, yes, we have to change. It's imperative. Now the question, can we change? And the answer to this question is very, very exciting and positive. So let's get out of the gloom here. The good news is we have the solutions. We have them available to us today. And let's look at some examples. So let's look at renewables, for example. Wind energy was predicted to produce 30 gigawatts of electricity worldwide by 2010. As of 2019, we have exceeded that prediction 22 times over. The growth in wind energy around the world is exponential. Wind energy could supply 40 times more electricity than the entire world currently uses. Solar energy is an even more dramatic story. 18 years ago, the best projection was that we would install 1 gigawatt of solar energy capacity every year by 2010. By 2010, though, we exceeded that 17 times, and in 2019, we exceeded that goal by 122 times. Even more dramatically than wind, we see exponential growth in the amount of solar energy being installed around the world. The cost of solar panels has fallen dramatically, just like we've seen with other technologies like computer chips and cell phones. Solar costs have fallen dramatically. In some regions of the world, solar energy is less than half the cost of electricity from burning coal. And what's really amazing about solar is some developing countries can use solar to leapfrog old technologies. They don't have to go in and build the infrastructure that developed countries have and hook into the grid. In many countries where there is no universal electricity grid, we're seeing businesses and homes leapfrog old technologies and install solar panels in places that never even had electricity. A really great example is Chile. So great success story of solar thanks to their policy decisions. The country's solar market took off slowly, but look what's happening now. So at the end of 2018, Chile had 2.3 gigawatts of installed solar, with an additional almost 17 gigawatts of solar projects approved or currently under construction. And there are many regions in the world where this type of growth and development are happening or are possible. Every hour, and the potential in solar is amazing. Every hour, the Earth gets as much energy from the sun as we need to run the entire global economy for a year. So if we can just increase, and that blows my mind, if we can just increase the fraction of this energy that we harvest, we can make a lot of progress towards solving the climate crisis. And we can all benefit economies at the same time. Let's take a look at battery storage. It's an essential part of the green energy revolution. Batteries allow us to store excess solar or wind energy when the sun's not shining and the wind isn't blowing. Batteries are also critical for the electric vehicle market. In 2016, the global cumulative storage capacity approached 3 gigawatts, which is almost 2 times the storage capacity that we had in 2011. And it's predicted to reach over 900 gigawatts by 2040. So that market is just exploding. Within the next 8 years, highly efficient LED lights are virtually going to take over the market, which energy efficient technologies like LEDs is just one example. They save people money. They help reduce emissions by cutting down the amount of electricity we use. Other positive news out of the automobile industry, all of these manufacturers, and there's some huge names on here, are currently offering or preparing to offer electric vehicles. Just another part of the sustainability revolution. So the question or the answer to, can we change, I think, is a resounding yes. But to tie this up, let's revisit that third question, the final question: will we change? And here too, Al Gore has exciting news for you. So in December of 2015, I'm sure you guys know, at the Paris climate negotiations, every nation in the entire world agreed to phase down greenhouse gas pollution to net zero emissions as early as the second half of this century. And, despite the fact that President Trump pulled this out, the US cannot actually legally withdraw us until the day after the election, which, gosh, is just coming up here in weeks. And it's very easy for us to get right back in it, should we choose to. But climate action isn't just about what countries do, right? And this is what we're here to talk about today. After this, we all have to take the lead on climate. We're seeing corporations, we're seeing states, we're seeing cities commit to reducing emissions. We're seeing marches and demonstrations and demands at the ballot box for the changes necessary to solve this crisis. So the question is, just kind of put a final pin in this. If you want to be a part of joining this movement, I think all of you already are, unless some of you are joining us for the first time. You can join those who are using their voices, using their votes, and using their choices, which hopefully we talk a little bit about today, to fight the climate crisis. So my call to action and Al Gore's begging of you is to use your voice, use your vote, which is a very timely call to action, and use your personal choices to speak truth to power as if your world depends on it, because frankly, it does, right? Our world does depend on it. If you want to learn more about, thanks for listening to this presentation, by the way. This is the first time I gave this. I don't know how much time I took. Hopefully somebody was clocking me on that. But if you want to dive deep into Al Gore's look at the issue, you can, if you haven't watched the movie, you should. And the sequel is out. It has been out for a few years, so check that out as well. It's called Truth to Power. And that is it. Thank you very much for listening. I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Would you like to take a couple of questions or any comments? We have time for just a couple before we move on.
Yeah, I certainly can. LEDs are great, but the cycle process of these car batteries is a bit concerning.
I'll just
Sure.
say,
Well, I'm not.
this is Dwayne. Am I? Yes, I'm
Hi, Dwayne.
Thank you. Your personable presentation kept my attention, and
oh, good.
I'm very familiar with the material, so I did have to remember again. But to hear things again is not bad, and makes it more on the tip of our minds, and keeps us ready to act as we need to, ever more ready to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I mentioned is that this is a volunteer thing, this Climate Reality Leader Project. The challenge to me is to just give this presentation as often as I can. So, I have to do it for free. And if there's any audiences, young, old, small, big, where I could pop in, give a presentation like this, rooted in science, just to start a dialogue, please, more than happy to do it. There's also a much longer, detailed 2-hour version.
Excellent. And actually, Dwayne and Jana are both climate reality leaders as well, to be honest. But I'm glad you were able to make the presentation,
cool.
Shane. I really enjoyed it. It was excellent. You did notice the comment that was in the chat. And I may, if you'd like to, I may call on Dwayne to actually answer that, because he probably has a much better knowledge of battery cycling than most of the rest of us here. So, Dwayne, would you like to take that one on?
There, it's strict on mute. So is the concern what the batteries might not last, or is it the end of life cycle? What was the concern exactly being raised there? I'm just not quite clear.
Yeah, Christine, are you there?
That is a good question.
Yeah, LEDs are great, but the cycle process of these car batteries is a bit concerning. I mean, I'm worried about, will the technology advance quickly enough, because batteries aren't good enough yet, right? So end of life. Definitely end of life.
If the reference is the end of life status of the battery material, there is an active company in California that has developed a recycling method for the lithium-ion battery material. And that is very much needed and happening. And I expect that it will develop more as the amount of battery material that needs that process will increase. If it's about the batteries lasting long, my sense also is that that is improving with time as well. So I can say that with the Tesla Powerwall on our house, which of course doesn't get as heavy a use as a car battery would, I haven't noticed a decrease in capacity over the 3 years that we've had our system. And it's doing daily cycling because I'm using the solar every night right now we're running on solar at my home.
Excellent.
I want to make a comment about that Shane generously offered to do his presentation, which is great. But also, so other people in the Tucson Climate Reality Group can also do presentation. And there's a particular woman, Carol, who can do it for, adapted for children. And she shows pictures of animals that are cute and, shows the different, has displays on the table for when you do it in classrooms. But anyway, if you want to reach out to Carol for, something tailored for youth, you can email me at jana@sustainabletucson.org, and I will let Carol know that you want that presentation.
Okay, and I noticed that Richard did ask a question about the PowerPoint. My understanding is we can't really share the PowerPoint that Al Gore has, but there will be a recording available afterwards. So if you'd like to watch it again, Richard, it will be on YouTube after we get done here. Okay, and we have one more comment from Shirley, and then I think we're going to stop after that because we do need to move on. Shirley said the graph showing increase in storage capacity is somewhat misleading since it's projecting to 2040. Many of us may not be around by then, so what's being done sooner than that? Capacity in cars, industry, homes? I guess the question is, how can we increase that storage capacity rapidly?
By sheer power of will.
Well, I'll be around, and so will my 7-year-old daughter. So, but I do have a job. I work at the university and I look at new technologies that are coming out, and I can tell you that there are projects being worked on with industry and in academic circles to get away from lithium ion and build entirely organic batteries. And some of it's quite promising, and has funding from the DOE and Department of Defense and others. So who knows? I mean, the industry could be, the battery industry could be, or the energy storage industry could be completely disrupted with new materials and new technologies.
Yeah, lithium. There's such a scramble to mine lithium these days, and it's becoming a political issue.
Yeah, and probably a values ethical issue too, right? There's probably slavery somewhere on that supply chain, so we got to get away from that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question, Shirley. And thank you so much for the presentation, Shane. It was excellent. I really enjoyed it. I have heard that one a few times as well, but it was really engaging, and thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Now to give Fatima a chance to give her presentation, I'm going to very quickly show a very brief video from Mayor Romero, and then I'm going to ask Fatima to share her presentation, and we're going to turn it over to her. So let me really quickly queue up that video, and then we'll jump right in.
Good afternoon, Tucson. I'm Mayor Regina Romero with this week's updates. It has been a busy and exciting week marked by the passing of the Tucson Climate Emergency Declaration. With record high summer temperatures and historic wildfires, it's clear we need to act boldly to combat climate change. The Climate Emergency Declaration serves as the foundation for bold climate action for city operations and sets a goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. Meaning that we aim to offset and eliminate the carbon emission we currently generate as a city to achieve net zero in 10 years. The declaration also focuses on deploying a just and equitable transition with an emphasis on people of color, immigrants, indigenous communities, low-income individuals, people with disabilities, and the unhoused, all who are disproportionately affected by the adverse health consequences of climate change. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I am so proud of our city's commitment to take bold action and do our part to address climate change. A huge thanks goes to the youth, part of the Arizona Climate Coalition, and Sunrise Tucson for their leadership on this critical issue, and to all those who sent letters or called in support of this initiative. During this week's Mayor and Council meeting, we discussed a 50.
Okay, and that's it. It goes on to other things that came up in the Mayor and Council meeting. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to Fatima Luna. Fatima, I'm going to embarrass you by reading your bio off of the city website. Fatima Luna serves as the Environmental and Sustainability Policy Advisor for Mayor Romero's office. In her role, she leads and manages the development and implementation of a climate action plan. The result of a collaboration between the City of Tucson, the University of Arizona, and Arizona State University, the role focuses on implementing solutions to address the warming climate in Tucson. Luna's experience includes serving as the environmental and natural resource economist for the Sonoran Institute in the water and ecosystem restoration, formerly known as the Colorado River Delta program. Most recently, she led an initiative to establish a small-scale conservation fund that collaborates with water users to create a network of community-led or community-owned small-scale restoration projects in the Colorado River Delta. Luna holds a bachelor's in environmental economics and policy from the University of California, Berkeley, and a master's in agricultural and resource economics from the University of Arizona. She serves as a board member of the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona. Fatima is a mother of three and an advocate for social and environmental justice, especially for disenfranchised communities of color, LGBTQ+, women, children, and immigrants. In her free time, she enjoys weightlifting, gardening, and playing with her son, Yoroko. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So Fatima, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. That was very nice. Let's see. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Sure can.
Okay, can you see the PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. All right, give me just 1 second. So you can see the PowerPoint. Can you still see it?
Yes.
We see it, but it's not in presentation mode right now. So we see the sidebar on it too.
Okay. Let me just make it bigger because when I do it in presentation mode, I lose some things. Can you see it well now?
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll work.
Perfect. So I'll just move to the next slide. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It is a great pleasure to be here with you all today. And I apologize I'm not sharing my video. My internet reacts with when I share my screen and my video. Anyways, it is really nice to be here with you tonight. I really enjoy your presentation, Shane. I think you provided a very good background and justification as to why the City of Tucson declared a climate emergency declaration. But before I move into that, I would like to provide a little bit of background in terms of like what is, a climate emergency declaration. So very simple. It is just a piece of legislation that is passed by a governing body, in this case, our mayor and council. And it basically commits formally the City of Tucson to take action to reverse global warming. So climate emergency declarations are very important because they recognize the serious risk of climate change, as Shane demonstrated, but it also acknowledges that urgency is needed to take action. They can also serve as tools, basically, to set goals to mitigate and adapt to climate change, and frameworks in terms of how those goals can be accomplished. And in general, the language within climate emergency declarations varies city by city. To provide a little bit of context, over 1,700 cities have declared climate emergency worldwide. I believe there's about 100 in the US, and Tucson is the second city in Arizona to declare a climate emergency, just after Flagstaff. They declared theirs in June of last year. So last year, the Arizona Youth Climate Coalition and other climate youths organized a series of strikes in Arizona. Mayor Romero and Supervisor Richard Elias attended some of them. And one of the requests that the youth was asking at these strikes was that cities declare a climate emergency. And as you know, early last month, Mayor and Council approved the climate emergency for the City of Tucson. This effort was led by Mayor Regina Romero and Councilmember Durham, but it was also a culmination of the work that you had been asking for. Our youth are fighting to have a livable future that can only be attained if we act on climate now. Also, the Arizona Youth Climate Coalition and Sunrise, they were very active in the process. They collected over 1,200 signatures from constituents, 35 different groups signing to their petition or sent letters to mayor and council. We also had great support during call to the audience. So this was, the climate emergency declaration was a youth-led effort. So what does a climate emergency declaration means or has or contains in terms of our city? So the first thing to know is that it is focused on city operations only. And the climate emergency declaration is comprehensive. As I mentioned, the length and the language within each climate emergency varies city by city. Ours is comprehensive. It recognizes key sustainability and climate work that the city has already done over the past, and also makes mention to some of the work that Pima County has done, for instance. And it acknowledges that Tucson is already experiencing some of the effects of climate change. As Shane mentioned, we are the third fastest warming city in the U.S. August, September, record high months in temperature that we have seen. So our communities, especially frontline and vulnerable communities, are already facing a real threats in public health and safety due to climate change. We saw the fires as well. And of course, we have been, the Colorado River has been in a 20-year drought. So we are already experiencing some of the effects of climate change. So the declaration as well, it acknowledges that climate change does not affect all the people the same. People of color, immigrants, indigenous communities, and frontline communities really are all disproportionately affected by climate change. So for that reason, it focuses on deploying a just and equitable transition to make everything that we can to shift to an economy that is not only like ecologically sustainable, but is also equitable and just for everyone, especially frontline communities. The declaration also identifies long, medium, and short-term goals, and I'll just very quickly highlight some of those. So the overarching long-term goal is for the city of Tucson, the city government, to become carbon neutral by 2030. The medium-term goal is to create and implement a 10-year climate action and adaptation plan. And one of the short-term goals is to update the city's greenhouse gas inventory within 3 months of the signing of the declaration. So the declaration also commits the city of Tucson to be intentional in community engagement and keeping the concerns of frontline and vulnerable communities central to the planning and implementation process, and all ties to deploying a just and equitable transition framework in all that we do. It also provides some direction to city departments, including working with PAG and a consultant, as well as the Climate Action and Advisory Council, to provide the data that is needed to update the city's greenhouse gas inventory. And once that is updated, to work with the consultant and the advisory council to identify strategies and actions that would basically take us to be carbon neutral by 2030. So city departments know their operations best, and they'll be critical in identifying and pursuing those strategies to get us to that carbon neutrality goal. Additionally, it also directs departments to prioritize and align their efforts with the Paris Agreement and the Green New Deal, and identify strategies that are people-centered. And it does go into detail in terms of what those climate and sustainability solutions could be. It talks about deploying and efficiently using clean renewable energy and locally sourced energy, transitioning out of fossil fuels by electrifying the city's public transit vehicle fleet, as well as retrofitting city facilities, capturing and safely storing carbon, mainly through the Tucson Million Trees Initiative or massive tree planting, deploying and enhancing land use patterns to foster safe, multimodal, equitable, clean transportation, mobility, and connectivity, as well as conserving resources, mainly through the elimination of waste. The declaration does establish a 50% waste diversion goal by 2030 and zero waste by 2050. And it also highlights the need to incorporate green infrastructure into community design. And this is something that our city is already doing. And actually, the city has made great progress in some of these initiatives as well. So, and the last thing that does, some of the solutions that does highlight is climate adaptation and resilience, highlighting that we need to prepare for, learn from, and adapt to the effects of climate change, and do so in a proactive and holistic way, where we look at infrastructure, at our culture, and also like at the institutional levels, so that our community can be climate resilient and take all of those levels into account. The declaration also directs the city manager to report back on opportunities and funding to address the crisis and its impacts, and doing so through some of the existing programs that the city already has, and potential new ones as well. Excuse me. And the declaration also provides direction to the city clerk to work with the advisory council to include greenhouse and coal pollutant impact statements, reduction statements, and drawdown statements in all the city motions that are relevant to climate and sustainability. So this is something that we have been getting a lot of good feedback in these particular clause, because it centers the need to think about climate change and sustainability and really like everything that the city does. So that's basically it. I know I went really fast, but I just wanted to leave time for questions if you have any. And then I'll stop sharing my screen if that, and I'll show my video.
Okay, thank you so much, Fatima. I really appreciate that. I do want to start off the questions with a question I have. As Tucsonans, what can we do to help with this initiative?
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. So there's a lot of things that we can do as individuals, as a community, as businesses, and really like there's many ways to engage. Climate action is a shared responsibility. The city government cannot do it alone. We all have a part to play, basically. And that comes from like water conservation at our homes to planting a tree. There are many sustainability actions that we, as members of this community can take. Sometimes we forget that we as consumers, we can really incentivize businesses to be more sustainable. We have purchasing power, and there's no supply of products without a demand for them. So if we start reducing to use single-use plastic, for instance, we can take our reusable water containers everywhere. We can take reusable bags when we go grocery shopping. And we are making an impact at the individual level, but as we all of us do that, we're essentially.
Oops, I think we lost you, Fatima. I think we lost your audio. There you go.
Okay, can you?
We can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So I was saying at the individual level, there's a lot of things that we can do. I do a lot of things at my house, and I can share some of them. I have an outdoor shower that helps water my fruit trees. We compost at home or food scrap, and then we create soil for our garden. We, grow our own vegetables. We have several shade trees to reduce our energy consumption in the summer. We have 3 kids, and the youngest loves to stay in the shower for hours. So we have 5-gallon buckets, and that's something that they know that's their limit, and they shower and play. And when they're done, they're done. Basically, so at the individual level, those are some of the things that we can do. I believe this group is already doing a lot of that. We can also organize our communities to act at a more collective level. And in terms of, plugging into the climate emergency declaration, we would be engaging community members very soon to identify the climate action priorities for the City of Tucson. Part of the climate emergency declaration is to have that very intentional community engagement, and your input will inform the climate action and adaptation plan. So stay tuned for that. That is forthcoming. Does that answer your question a little bit?
It did, and I think it also kind of answered one of the questions we had about how we as citizens can interact with the Climate Advisory Committee. So what I'm hearing from you is you're going to do similar to what the Transportation Planning Department did when they were putting together the Move Tucson plan of getting out and actually interacting with citizens of Tucson to get their feedback.
Yes, that is the plan. Intentional community engagement. We know that oftentimes frontline communities are left out of these conversations because, they are framed as they are hard to get because they live in certain neighborhoods. So part of the plan is to be very intentional in our community engagement, similar to what Move Tucson did, and have the voices of the people that are most impacted by climate change being reflected in the final climate action and adaptation plan. So that is part of the process, and that would take different forms and different times during the process. It won't be just a one-time give us your feedback, but also more of an interactive process where once we have once we take the feedback, go back and ask, did we get it right? And also provide opportunity for the community to provide feedback in the draft of the climate action plan. The intention is that those voices are reflected in the final product and also in the implementation of it.
Okay, great. And speaking of timelines, Shirley asked, plans to identify, et cetera, are fine, but is there a way to accelerate the timeline, such as a commitment to immediately install solar panels on every city-owned building?
So right now, we are meeting with the different city departments to provide a debrief on the climate emergency declaration and together identify potential strategies, projects, and actions to support the climate emergency so that we have shovel-ready projects, for instance. So we are flushing out the overall project plan, but the expectation is that those actions that you're referring to will be intensifying the next couple months. And just to be fair, there's already a lot of ongoing initiatives that the city has, including, increasing the installations of solar panels, obtaining additional. Right now, we have a electric city bus being piloted, but we have 9 more coming by the end of 2022. So it's exciting what the city is working towards and planning on doing, and all of these actions will be basically plug in. So the climate emergency declaration is the foundation to align all of the actions that the city is planning on doing or is doing. And we're also looking at our recycling systems, our transit systems, tree planting, exploring the possibility of composting at the landfill. So definitely one of the mayor has made it very clear that we will not wait until the climate action and adaptation plan is final to begin implementing activities. So there would be ongoing climate actions and sustainability actions as the plan moves forward. So that and that's basically working with city departments to identify what those are and begin implementing them or setting the stage for their implementation.
Excellent. And actually, you kind of led into 2 more questions that came up. Speaking of transportation, does this mean that rail stations will actually be seen through? And say, for example, we get that commuter rail line from Phoenix to Tucson that we've all been wanting for so long?
Yeah, well, we are, so right now, as you mentioned, the transportation and Department of Transportation and Mobility is putting together the Move Tucson, which is the transportation master plan, which will identify all of the strategies that can be implemented. And of course, there would be, all of it would be considered. And in terms of, so one of the things that we're doing is identifying some of the actions that can be implemented in the short, medium, and long term. So the idea is to have these complete portfolio of all these potential actions within transportation, within water, environmental services to implement. So yes, I mean, ideally we want to do all of them, but of course we have to be strategic and working with the departments and looking also at, potential collaborations with other businesses and depending on the strategy. So the answer is we'll see. We're looking at everything and we're trying to, be mindful of what are the strategies and actions that will have the greatest impact and also that are feasible and that, will take us to that carbon neutrality goal by 2030. So nothing is off the table and we'll be exploring all of the options basically.
Excellent. And following on to that, you did mention Mayor Romero's initiative to plant 1 million trees, I believe it is. So how is that going to be implemented?
Yes. So just to provide a little bit of context, so the Tucson Million Trees Initiative was launched in April, and so far we have planted 600 trees with our partners, Trees for Tucson. They are our main partners, and they have a lot of years of on-the-ground experience. So they're great. So the initiative basically has two focus areas. The first one is science-based, which is basically having the right tree, right place, right size, considering our desert climate, considering water efficient water use techniques, including rainwater harvesting, as well as the natural propagation of trees that currently happens in Tucson. So that is the first area of focus. The second is being people-centered, and what that means is ensuring that low tree canopy neighborhoods that are vulnerable to heat are prioritized, and those neighborhoods are usually low-income neighborhoods, neighborhoods of color. So in essence, that's what the initiative is. And also we're looking at it holistically in terms of like many of the departments already have, green infrastructure and in their planning. So how can we maximize those resources? How can we use a composting project to support the tree production? How can we increase the city's production capacity? How can we use the already practices of trimming the city trees to produce mulch, or even the compost? So looking at that strategy within that holistic view of what is already happening at the city, so that we maximize resources, working with our partners, and also creating those private partnerships as well. As with climate action, planting trees is also a shared responsibility. The benefits are for everybody. So looking at holistically and partnering with the different stakeholders to ensure that trees are not only planted, but they're also maintained, and they provide those benefits in the long term.
Yep, that's definitely music to my ears. And full disclosure, I'm a docent with Watershed Management Group as well. So I know you've been working a lot with them on green infrastructure and a lot of these projects about making efficient use of our stormwater and rainwater to be able to irrigate these native trees. So I really love the idea of that project. Juliana, I misspoke, has had a question about if she has an idea to address with regard to CO2 reduction. Who should she talk to?
Me. Please talk to me. Yes.
Well, maybe I can I can email you.
Yes, please email me. If you don't have my email, I can put it in the.
Or you can just tell
chat.
it to me. Tell it to me.
Okay, so it's fatima.luna@tucsonaz.gov.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And Shane had a question. He was wondering what is being done to encourage new residential construction to be built more sustainably, zero net carbon, more sustainable materials or construction processes, which I know is also of interest to Robin and her committee. So what is that going to, is that going to come into play in Plan Tucson, or how does that work?
So yes, we are going to be looking at everything, and that's key in terms of working with our different city departments. The Department of Planning as well. They have been doing great work in that area, and we will continue to work with them to identify strategies to get to our carbon neutrality goal by 2030. So that the idea is that working with the different departments, they know their operations best, and they know what is working, what can we improve, and definitely listening to the experts and and having that common goal. So if we want to be carbon neutral by 2030, what does each department basically has to contribute to get us there? So construction, all of that would be, everything would be analyzed, and we'll look at, what is the most feasible, effective way of getting to our carbon neutral goal, including that area. Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Kevin, you had a question earlier about the community engagement process. Did that get answered, or do you still? Okay, so Kevin got his answer. Norman asked, are there projections, and I think this is actually what you're talking about doing right now, are there projections as to how much of the carbon neutrality goal can be met by actual reduction of carbon emissions versus carbon offsets?
So that's going to be part of the process. So we are in the process of updating the city's greenhouse gas inventory, which would provide the baseline of where we are. We are going to be working with consultants to do some modeling in terms of business as usual. What happens if we don't change anything? But also scenario analysis, where knowing the insights of the department as well as knowing our goals, we'll basically run different scenarios to get us there. So that's going to be actual part of the process of developing the climate action and adaptation.
Okay, and the next question was Trace's, but to be honest, Trace, I'm not sure exactly what the question was. So if you'd like to ask it, go ahead.
Yeah, the city's actions are predominantly oriented towards the city government, but we've got 250,000 old houses inside the city. PAG says we're $15 billion short on the transportation costs in the next 25 years, et cetera, et cetera. We've got housing, water, transportation, sanitation, food, a bunch of issues. How do you think the city is going to be able to help the community make these changes?
Yes, so even though the climate emergency declaration focuses only on city operations, the climate action and adaptation plan will be citywide. So we'll have the greenhouse gas inventory for city operations, but also citywide, and that's part of the process of identifying those strategies citywide as well. And it would also be part of the community input in terms of what does the community believe should be prioritized in climate action and sustainability, and identifying those strategies and selecting the ones that are most feasible. So it would be part of the planning process. And of course, the city is limited in terms of we can't let, we can certainly incentivize some actions. And in some others were preempted from, forcing things, if that makes sense.
Well, do you have any strategies for how we might actually enable the people and businesses of Tucson to spend billions and billions of dollars of our own money to do a whole bunch of things, because the city isn't even close to being able to do the things, but it can facilitate and enable?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, as individuals, we do have purchasing power. So our behavior, our choices or preferences do have an impact. From that point of view, we can, select or be very mindful of our actions and incentivize change in that way. Also, the city, can incentivize businesses to adopt sustainable practices. And there's there are already some initiatives that kind of do that, and also some businesses are increasingly acknowledging that climate change also impacts their operations and sustainability. I mean, you can't, really have businesses without water. You can't really establish a business in a city that doesn't have, clean air, for instance. So businesses are increasingly acknowledging that, and some of them are seeing climate change as an opportunity to become more like energy efficient, and implement other strategies. So certainly, like, continuing to incentivize businesses to do that. Yeah, that's one of the things that we can do, but also individually, our preferences, consumer preferences also have an impact.
Yeah, I would suggest that people try to come up with solutions to some of these things. I know Trace is always concerned about our aging housing, and that's a problem that could be worked out at Tucson for the World, where you work with other people and do research and find, if there's funding for that or what kind of initiative that you could promote. Because we can't really count on the city to do everything for us. And in some places, maybe you'll have an idea for an action that you want to present to the city, and you can also organize that at Tucson for the World.
And we will talk about that a little bit more as we get farther on. I'm sorry, who did I step over there?
This is Fatima, and I was just going to add, and certainly if you had ideas, shoot them my way. I share my email, so I'll be happy to take a look at them.
Excellent. And speaking of which, Robin put a message in there that she has a plan for easing some of the construction issues. And so, Robin, was that intended for Fatima to contact you, or just anyone who's interested? Again, Robin's email is robin@sustainabletucson.org. And I don't know if she's going to unmute to answer that or not. There she is.
Okay, hi, this is Robin. Yeah, you can email me at robin@sustainabletucson.org.
Okay, great. And Danielle, who leads our charitable and faith-based sustainability committee, has a comment that I'd asked Tucson Water and the city manager about creating a tree and rainwater harvesting ordinance for new home construction. What would be the obstacles in having to put such an ordinance into action?
Into action? That is a good question. I do know that there's some ordinance in place, and I think it's part of not changing the culture, but creating the mechanisms to highlight the implementation. I do think that the climate emergency declaration does provide some of that guidance, does provide some of that foundation for climate action and sustainability. It is approved by mayor and council. So I do think that is a great stepping stone to go off into other actions, ordinances, policies that can support, climate action and sustainability, including protecting trees. So that is definitely something that it's worth looking at, and ensuring that it's not just created, but it also has the tools to be implemented.
Excellent. And Mary Beth asked if there's an email listserv, or what's the best way to stay informed about the city's activities, especially related to the climate emergency and the planning around that.
Yes, we have those weekly videos that the mayor provides. So she provides an update, high-level update on all the city initiatives. The mayor's office initiatives, including some of the city initiatives as well. But we also have a newsletter that you can sign or register for, and that newsletter is a monthly newsletter. So we do provide, we have a sustainability and climate action section in the newsletter, and we provide all the updates in there. So yeah, I would recommend signing into the newsletter for sure. And also we provide updates in our social media, the mayor's social media accounts, and the daily videos are also great ways to get updated.
Yep, and I would also point out that I'm pretty sure all the council members also have newsletters they send out, and I know I'm in Ward 6, and Steve K's newsletter is excellent, and I'm sure that the other wards are very similar to that.
Yes, they all do.
Okay, yeah, and Robin just had a comment about hopefully the transit plan will improve transportation without destroying habitat. And yeah, that's what we all hope for, Robin. Christine, I think this is also a comment just about that's wonderful to hear about the commitment to planting trees. Places in the Middle East state they made patches of thick tree growth, and it has helped with reducing temperatures by 10 degrees and reduce stress. And along the same line, we seem to be on a run of tree things here. So how does the city view a plaza removing parking lot trees as happened at Swan and Grant? I noticed that the other day in the Trader Joe's parking area, presumably to pave, although I don't know, it may have also been health issues with the trees, but I did notice they took the trees out that they had in the parking lot. So is there anything any control the city has on something like that?
I do know that the city provides maintenance for trees that are likely to impact the city's infrastructure. So if that tree is likely to, destroy line wash, for instance, they will remove them. And that's just part of functionality technical issues. In terms of like businesses removing trees, I agree. I do think that tree protection, should be prioritized. And I provided a link to the mayor's website, and in that link, it has the button to subscribe to our newsletter.
Excellent, thank you. And some more, actually, there's about 3 comments in a row that are again related to the urban heat island effect and using trees. And of course, one of the reasons for that tree planting program is to try to reduce all the big, wide, bare streets and the parking lots. But there is a question about what can we do about the parking lots. I know we've had some discussions. I think Dwayne would suggest, well, we just should put solar panels over all of them, and I would agree with that. But do we have good data as far as the areas with tree cover compared to the ones with older trees? So, I mean, the ones that have been new plantings versus older tree areas, and the cooling effect, and also I would assume the cooling effect in relation to the areas that don't have sufficient tree cover.
Yeah, we do have a map. We develop an internal map for potentially selection of sites for tree planting, and that map includes a layer of the tree canopy that was provided by PAG. We also have a layer of the heat vulnerability index, and there's a specific methodology to calculate that, including what are some of the vulnerable communities to heat, including like the folks over 65 and young kids, low-income communities, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have those tools to select some of those priority sites and those sites that basically urgently need tree cover. So yes, that is being looked at.
Okay, and there's actually a comment here from Gigi, and I had heard about this, that many people are not aware that the city has embarked on a demonstration project of organic playing fields in 2 parks, which will save about 30 to 80% of the water over a traditional park with all the chemical fertilizers and everything else, and will draw down more carbon than the current fields. They were funded by Stonyfield Farms Play Free Initiative, and 2 new parks are going to be put in organically. So that was just a comment. I don't know if you'd like to do any follow-up on that, Fatima. I'm sure you're probably aware of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example. So thank you for sharing that.
And then we have a question here, which probably is maybe a little bit out of your area because the city of Tucson doesn't have a lot of livestock being raised in it. But what about the livestock production in Arizona as far as grazing, humanitarian, and everything? Is there anything the city is addressing as far as that goes?
Yeah, I wouldn't know just now. Yeah, but I mean, if I'll be happy to look into it, and then I'll share any information that I do find out from some of my colleagues.
Yeah, I think that'd be more of a county or a statewide initiative as far as addressing that kind of thing, since we just don't have. I've never seen a cow inside of the city limits of Tucson, so I don't know how much impact that would have on us. Gigi asked, the 10-year plan for Tucson, I'm assuming the last iteration of Plan Tucson, included the idea of new housing using white reflective roofing for heat reduction. Has that actually happened?
Yeah, I am not sure, to be honest with you, but I do think as I was doing some of the research, I did see that as one of the strategies that cities have been implementing. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the city did it at some point, and it was, I don't know if it was continuing, but that is a great question that I need to follow up on.
Okay, and actually, I believe that's about the end of the questions. So if anyone has a question that they didn't get a chance to put in the chat or something that came up as we were going through these, go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask your question.
Fatima, thank you. Just want to say thank you. Thank you for making yourself accessible to the city.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, I really appreciate it. And yes, we will give you some time, Shane, because it's time for you to talk about Tucson for the world. I thank you so much for joining us, Fatima, and taking the time. Oh, do you have a question, Gigi? Go ahead.
I have a question. I just was going to share a little bit more about the trees and the grasses and so forth. One football field is about the equivalent of an acre. And when it's planted regeneratively, which is a term that's even more than organic, using that compost and mulch and those processes that you're talking about, developing even more, we can really put those to good use. As we get more and more of the city, more and more of the county and school districts to get their grass fields drawing down carbon regeneratively, it could have a nice effect for us that is just as effective or more than the trees, because we don't have shade over the grass. But for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to watch on Netflix the film Kiss the Ground, you'll understand this regenerative process that is what we're talking about for the trees and the grass. And it's an urban way to do something that's modeled in the agricultural community and grazing community. Kiss the Ground, it's well worth it.
Yeah, that is an excellent movie, without a doubt. I did put a link for the PAG Green Infrastructure Prioritization Map in the chat for those of you who asked. It is a great map. I love looking at that, and it does show very graphically where there's sufficient tree cover and where we need a lot of work to do. So it is an excellent map. And I think that's all we've got for you. So Fatima, you could stay with us if you'd like, or if you'd like to hang up, that would be fine as well. Thank you again for taking the time. I really appreciate you supporting us and coming to tell us how we as Tucsonans can get involved in this climate emergency process and how to deal with that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I will step out. My children are, it's their time now.
I understand.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, and Shane, you're up.
Well, I just wanted to, thanks, Dan. Thanks for the extra minute here. I just wanted to invite everybody to come out to what is now our third Tucson for the World event. So we are trying to create a dependable place on a monthly basis where we can launch new projects, right? So we get together at Sustainable Tucson or all the other great organizations you're involved with locally, and you talk about the issues. But if you have ideas to launch new projects, whether that's a it could turn into a business, it could be a nonprofit, or it could just be a project that maybe is temporary or maybe community focused. A place to come and launch those with other folks that are interested in launching new things, creating new things, right? So I just want to tell you real quickly about the format. The next event is October 26th. It starts on a Monday and it ends on a Wednesday. So we do a quick kickoff, spend about an hour and a half together, and you're welcome to pitch ideas. So there's an opportunity to pitch your idea, or you can not pitch and you can team up with somebody else who pitched an idea that you liked, right? And you can bring, the format is for new, fresh ideas. This is the place to kick off new things. But if you have ideas that you've been thinking about for a while and maybe been sketching out, those are certainly welcome. This is not a venue for, pitching existing projects, things that have already have teams and funding and revenue and have really taken off. This is an opportunity to launch new ideas and turn them into something that creates actual impact in the world. So the format again is spend an hour and a half. Those that want to pitch are welcome to do so. And we form some teams, and then you have time to yourselves to go off with your team and do some research, build some prototypes, sketch out what the thing might look like, maybe gather some evidence that your idea will work and it will actually solve a real problem. And hopefully along the way you learn something and change your idea a little bit into something that's more likely to succeed. And then we come back on Wednesday for another hour and a half, and we present, each team kind of presents what they've learned, what they've accomplished. And it's very community minded, very supportive group. And we just got started. So this is our third one, and we hope to grow from there. We always pick a theme for each event based off of the theme that Sustainable Tucson picked, right? So this event is climate action, or this theme is climate action. And so, why not specifically bring ideas that can help sort of materialize the climate action plan, right? So there's a lot baked into that. And so if you have ideas, like I think some of you are pitching ideas in the chat. I saw some of you had ideas. And Keith emailed me one that I need to look at, but that stuff's perfect, right? So bring it, throw it out there, and maybe you'll get a team formed, and maybe you'll have a few days and a few different minds focused on it, focused on taking it to the next step, whatever that next step might be. And just to give you some background, this is a format that I've personally been running for about 10 years. But it wasn't focused on climate change. It was just helping entrepreneurs and innovators launch any idea. So the format totally works, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a great networking event. It's a great way to learn stuff, and it's an awesome way to kick something off. I encourage you, if you have an idea and you've been sitting on this idea, regardless of what it is or how terrible you think it is or how awesome you think it is, pitch it, because your idea will never have an impact in the world if you don't get it out and try to do something and turn it into some action. This is a great place to do that in really non-judgmental, supportive, risk-free kind of environment. And for those of you that are thinking about participating, I'll put somebody did put a link already. Thank you. So Jana put a link in the chat so you can go join the next event. But if you're thinking about pitching, I just wanted to tell you what the pitch looks like, because the pitch could be something you get intimidated by, but really don't want you to be. It's actually really fun. It's casual. And I have a really easy format for you. You're going to have a minute to pitch, so we keep it really simple, right? So you start with the problem. Then you tell us who your customer is, right? Or your user, or another word for that would be those who benefit, right? And then you tell us the solution. A lot of people start with the solution, right? They just say, I want to build this amazing device and it's going to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And well, okay, well, maybe people don't realize that there's a problem. It's important to first tell us why this is important and who's experiencing pain. So you begin with the problem. So this problem is really important to me, and these people are suffering. And this is the specific description. Yeah, so what another way that Jana put is, why should we care? Start with the why. That's what really hooks people, draws them in. Then tell us who's going to benefit from this, who will use it, or who might potentially even buy it. And then tell us your idea for how to solve it. Because if you want to get people to join your team, they need to be bought into the problem. They need to care about the issue. And then you, hopefully, will be flexible enough that you're not married to your solution, because there's probably a million ways to solve that problem. But you at least have an idea of how to maybe you could solve that problem. And so then you describe the solution. And then your team, you can form a team, and then maybe along the way of those 3 days, you'll learn something and change that solution slightly, which is a good sign, because you probably don't have it all figured out. You probably don't have 100% of everything figured out about your project, and you need to be open to change a little bit. Jana's looking for an example, so I'll give you an example. One of the examples I like to pitch is Airbnb, because it's just such an easy thing to pitch, right? So there are people. So an example of Airbnb would be, all right. So in some situations, all hotels get sold out, right? And people still, like, for example, the Tucson Gem Show, right? People come to Tucson for the Gem Show. All the hotels are sold out, booked way in advance, but they need a place to stay. And people are desperate. They're camping, they're sleeping in RVs. Wouldn't it be great if people in town could rent out their extra bedrooms or their homes, make a little extra money locally, but also put these people, give these people who are visiting a safe, comfortable place to stay. So I suggest this new idea called Airbnb, where we create an online marketplace where people can list extra bedrooms and rent them to people who are visiting to Tucson, who either don't want to stay in a hotel or can't for some reason, right? So very simple, short approach to your concept. But I started with the problem, I described who's going to use it, and then I told you what the actual solution might look like. Was that good, Dan?
That was good. I like that.
Can I give a sustainable pitch?
Yeah, let's give like one that has something to do with climate change. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm going to do a minute, but I just want to tell about a friend of ours, Justin, has a new business, and the problem was that we all want to do rainwater harvesting because we want to conserve water here in Tucson during this 20-year drought. But a lot of people don't want to have a big old ugly cistern in their yard. So the business that he came up with was, and his friend, was to make these more square-shaped cisterns that you can make into a fence and you don't see them, and you can shape them almost like Lego blocks and put them, the whole fence and that whole area you can use, you and your neighbor can use that water to do rainwater harvesting, and you can even use one of them to create a bench in your yard, so nobody has to see that, that ugly cistern. So that's just one example of a problem that he solved, with his business idea.
Cool. And those are both for-profit ideas, right? But you could pitch a small community project. You could say, if, for example, like, let's imagine that Sustainable Tucson doesn't exist, right? I could imagine somebody pitching the idea of starting Sustainable Tucson. And that could be, hey, there's a lot of climate activists or people that are interested in sustainability in Tucson, but there's no place for them to get together and share ideas, meet each other, launch new projects. So I would love to start a new meetup group. We could call it Sustainable Tucson. We could meet monthly. Who's with me? Let's kick this off, right? It could be really simple like that.
And I would also suggest that if you have an idea and you have some friends that would also like to work on that, to start your own team and bring it, and then use, Shane has this lean canvas startup way of like working through the ideas and thinking through them and seeing if they're viable solutions and researching them. And you can bring your own team if you want to, and work on one of this, work on your project through Shane's system. And that's what I'm planning to do. I've got a really exciting idea, and I'm bringing a few people to work on my idea at Shane's event.
Keith's asking a question here. My ideas are more about institutional approaches to fighting climate change, not technology. Obviously this is not, Tucson for the World is not reserved for-profit products, not reserved for technology. We welcome any type of project. I need to dig into your idea, Keith, but whatever you're looking to do, there needs to be change in the world that needs to happen, right? And probably a group of people need to come together to make that change. There needs to be a plan, right? And you probably need to learn more about it, make sure your approach is correct. So it's probably perfect. Now the question is your idea really, does it require a lot of like subject matter expertise or deep industry expertise or any kind of weird specific knowledge? And if that's the case, we're still pretty small, and you may not find the right type of talent or person at this event. But it's interesting, and maybe we could do something that, like in the future, we could do a theme, like maybe even for November or something, or in the future, we could pick a theme for a month that your idea would be perfect for, and then we could market it to people who would be even better fit for your team, and maybe get a little group going around that,
Yeah, my ideas are kind of in line with the overall contour of efforts to fight climate change, and they're pretty audacious, but I thought, climate change it's an emergency. It requires an emergency response, and so we're all on the same page as far as trying to fight climate change. And so, even if they're at odds with what somebody else thinks is the way to go, then I'm just putting it out there, and it's
good. Yeah, well, we need more. I think we need bolder action for sure. We need ideas all over the place. Give it a shot, man. Come on out. You never know. You may not form a team around your idea, but you might meet a couple of people and connect with them offline, and they might jump into your idea, and you could start something with them later, outside of this event. That happens all the time with these kinds of events. And who knows, people might even just share thoughts and ideas that would help you improve your idea.
Shane, I believe that the Zero Plastic Waste is planning to do the next Sustainable Tucson meeting, and that would be a good one for you to do as your next theme, actually.
Great. Okay, that'll be our November event theme, plastics. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Hope to see you guys there.
Yep, absolutely.
At least come out and check out the kickoff. Just come. Just watch pitches. It's fun.
And I'm going to throw one thing. Yeah. I'm going to throw something in the chat here real quick. This is just a link. I'm not going to try and go over it because we're getting late, and I know that when you're approaching 2 hours, that's way too long for any kind of online meeting. So there is a score sheet, the Sustainable Development Support Network, Solutions Network, sorry, they do annual reports on U.S. cities. And so Tucson, we're in the bottom 50 of large cities in the United States. That is a breakdown of the scores by individual targets. So it might give you an idea of something like, you're thinking we need to do something, but you're not quite sure what problem to address. Take a look at that. It's got it broken down by a lot of different individual targets that need to be addressed for Tucson to be more sustainable. So, and if you have any questions, just reach out to me, dan@sustainabletucson.org. Okay, last chance. Anyone have any comments, questions, concerns before we end this call?
Well, Dwayne asked a question that looks like Shane answered. Can people people who work during the day submit a video to Tucson for the World? And Shane said yes.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. I think that's it. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Shane, for being here. Thank you, Fatima in absentia. I know she already had to leave, but and thank all of you for being here and spending this evening with us. Really appreciate it. It's an important topic, and I appreciate all of your enthusiasm and taking the time to actually spend it here discussing a very important topic. And with that, I wish you all a good night, and we will see you at Tucson for the World, hopefully.